Deep in the shadows of ancient forests, where sunlight barely dares to slip through the cracks between the leaves, something's waking up. These aren't wolves. They're not bears. They're wild boars, silent hunters with razor-sharp tusks and eyes that burn red like fresh spilled blood. From the untamed wilderness of America to the quiet countryside of Europe, they've left behind tales of terror, wounds that never heal, and screams that echo through the endless night. So grab a seat, dim the lights, and let me tell you about the monsters lurking in the shadows of the woods. But be warned, they might be listening. Back in 2019, in a little nowhere town called Coldwater, tucked away in Tennessee, folks started whispering about something strange. Coldwater's the kind of place where time feels frozen. Dirt roads wind through cornfields, old wooden houses creak in the wind, and a thick forest wraps around the town like a living wall. People here live slow, hunting, farming, swapping stories by the fire. But on one bone-chilling winter night, all that peace shattered like mist in a storm. Jake Harper, a seasoned hunter, decided to head into the woods to track a deer he'd been after for weeks. Jake wasn't the type to scare easy. He'd stared down black bears, dodged rattlesnakes, and weathered storms that'd make most folks run for cover. With his rifle slung over his shoulder and a hunting knife in his pocket, he stepped into the forest under a pale, ghostly moon. Dry branches snapped under his boots, and his breath hung in the air like wisps of smoke. But that night, something felt off. A cold shiver crawled down his spine. Not from the winter chill, but from the feeling that something was watching him. The rustle of leaves suddenly stopped, like the whole forest was holding its breath. Then, out of the darkness, came a sound. A low, guttural growl, unlike anything Jake had ever heard. It wasn't a bear's roar or a wolf's howl. It was deeper, primal, like the forest itself was breathing. Jake gripped his rifle, his heart pounding like a drum. He crept toward the sound, figuring it was just a regular wild boar. Boars weren't rare in Tennessee, and they usually steered clear of people. Jake had bagged dozens of them without a hitch. But as he neared a dense thicket, his eyes locked onto a massive shape. It was a wild boar, but nothing like he'd ever seen. This thing was nearly as tall as a man, its black bristles stiff as steel, its curved tusks glinting in the moonlight, and its eyes, God, those eyes, glowed red like embers, staring right through Jake, like they could see his soul. His throat went dry. He raised his rifle, his finger trembling on the trigger, but before he could fire, the beast charged with terrifying speed. Its roar shook the forest, drowning out the wind. Jake barely got out a scream before it slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. Its tusks ripped through his thigh, blood gushing like a river. He tried to roll away, but the boar wouldn't stop. It attacked like it was driven by something not of this world, its red eyes blazing in the dark. Jake swung his knife, stabbing into its shoulder, but the beast just roared in rage and rammed him into a tree. His ribs cracked, and darkness started closing in. By some miracle, Jake's gunshot had alerted a group of hunters nearby. They came running, firing round after round into the creature. It took dozens of bullets before the massive boar finally collapsed, its black blood pooling on the forest floor. But not before it left Jake with scars that would change his life forever. He survived, dragged to a hospital with deep gashes and a leg nearly torn apart. But the real horror wasn't the scars on his body. Every night, when he closed his eyes, he saw those glowing red eyes, like the beast was still hunting him from beyond the grave. The folks in Coldwater called it the Black Phantom. No one knew where it came from. Some said it was just a boar mutated by chemicals from an old factory nearby. Others whispered it was the embodiment of an ancient curse, woken from the earth itself. Whatever it was, that attack changed Coldwater forever. The woods that were once a hunter's paradise became a no-man's land. And on quiet nights, low growls still echo through the dark, reminding everyone that the Black Phantom might not be truly gone. Thousands of miles away, in the legendary Black Forest of Germany, another story was brewing. It was 2021, and the Black Forest wasn't just a place of fairy tales about witches and werewolves anymore. A new threat, far more real, was rising. Wild boars had long been a problem in Europe, tearing up crops, attacking livestock, and sometimes even people. But what happened in the Black Forest that year wasn't just a problem. It was a nightmare. Anna Schmidt, a young biologist, was sent to the forest to study the sudden boom in the wild boar population. Anna was a no-nonsense type, not one for ghost stories. She believed everything had a scientific explanation. Armed with a backpack full of gear and a tablet loaded with data, she ventured into the Black Forest, where towering trees blocked out the sun and the air was thick with the smell of damp earth. One afternoon, as Anna was setting up a camera trap near a stream, she heard an odd sound, a long scraping hiss, like metal dragging across stone. She froze, scanning the trees, but saw nothing but swaying branches and heavy shadows. She told herself it was just the wind, but as she bent down to check her camera, a foul stench hit her, blood and rotting earth. Her heart raced. She looked up and froze in terror. A pack of wild boars, at least 20 strong, stood silently just a few yards away. They didn't move. They didn't make a sound. They just stared at her with lifeless eyes. The leader, a massive male with silver-gray fur, stepped forward. A long scar ran from its eye to its jaw, like it had survived countless battles. Anna tried to back away, but her foot caught on a root. She fell, and that's when the pack attacked. They surged forward like a tidal wave, their tusks tearing through her clothes and flesh. Anna screamed, swinging her small knife, but it was useless. The boars didn't flinch, didn't fear. They were driven by pure bloodlust. In a desperate moment, a gunshot rang out. A ranger patrolling nearby had heard her screams. He fired wildly, scattering the pack. Anna was pulled from the blood-soaked leaves, but she was barely alive. Her left arm was shredded, and deep bites on her chest made every breath agony. At the hospital, she could only whisper one thing. Those weren't boars. They were something else. Anna survived, but she never went back to the Black Forest. She quit her job, moved to a big city where trees and shadows couldn't haunt her. But the nightmares followed. She saw those empty eyes, heard that metallic hiss, and felt the scarred boar waiting for her in the dark. When her camera footage was recovered, it left scientists stunned. For a few seconds before it was destroyed, the camera showed the boars standing in a perfect circle, like they were performing some kind of ritual. And the scarred leader, it seemed to stare right into the lens. Anna's story spread like wildfire across Europe, and the Black Forest became a focal point of fear. Locals started calling the boars Die Schatten, the shadows. They believed the forest was cursed, that the boars weren't just animals but tools of an ancient force, awakened by humanity's intrusion. Rangers reported that the boar population wasn't shrinking, it was growing, despite massive hunting efforts. And on moonless nights, that metallic hiss still echoed, like a warning from the dark. Back in the States, in 2023, another attack rocked rural Arkansas. The Carter family, living near the Ouachita Forest, faced a night of pure horror. The Carters were a family of 4. John, the dad, Mary, the mom, and their kids, 14-year-old Emily and 10-year-old Ben. They ran a small farm, raising pigs and growing corn. Wild boars sometimes wandered near their land, but John always scared them off with his shotgun. One crisp fall night, as the family sat down for dinner, strange noises came from the pig pen. Their livestock squealed in panic, like they were being torn apart. John grabbed his gun and ran outside, thinking it was a coyote or a stray boar. But when he reached the pen, what he saw stopped him cold. A dozen massive boars, unnaturally huge, were ripping his pigs to shreds, blood pooling on the dirt. But the worst part? Their eyes weren't animal eyes. They were deep, black voids, like they had no souls. John shouted, firing at the pack, but they didn't flee. Instead, they turned and charged him. Mary, hearing the shots, ran out with an axe, desperate to save her husband. But the boars were too strong. They knocked John down, tearing into his stomach. Mary swung her axe, sinking it into one boar's skull, but it just roared and bit into her leg. Emily and Ben watched from the window, screaming in terror. Emily, only 14, grabbed her dad's old rifle and fired wildly, driving the boars back into the woods. When the cops arrived, they found John dead, his body mangled. Mary survived but lost a leg and was left in shock. Emily and Ben were sent to live with relatives, but they never spoke of that night again. Locals said the Ouachita forest had changed. The boars weren't normal anymore. They were fiercer, smarter, and seemed driven by something. After the Carter attack, scientists started digging into the wild boar phenomenon across America and Europe. They found the boar population was exploding, and the animals were changing. Some were unnaturally large, with thicker hides and sharper tusks. One theory blamed pollution and climate change for their aggression. But the folks living near the forests had a different answer. The boars weren't animals anymore. They were the wrath of nature itself, or worse, pawns of something darker. In 2024, one final attack grabbed the world's attention. In Tuscany, Italy, a group of tourists was hiking through a forest to explore ancient Roman ruins. The group of 6, from all over the world, was led by a guide named Marco. They didn't know the locals had been avoiding these woods for months, ever since a farmer was attacked by boars and vanished. That afternoon, as the group rested by a stream, they heard an eerie sound, not rustling leaves, but a low whisper, like voices murmuring in the dark. Marco, who'd grown up in the area, felt a chill. He told everyone to pack up and leave. But before they could move, a pack of boars appeared from all sides, surrounding them. These weren't ordinary boars. Their fur was caked with mud and blood, and their jaws held fragments of bone, human bone. Panic erupted. One tourist, Sarah from the US, tried to run but was tackled by a boar. The pack tore her apart in seconds. Marco drew his hunting knife, trying to protect the group, but the boars didn't flinch. They attacked with chilling coordination, like they were following orders. Another tourist, Hans from Germany, was dragged into the bushes, his screams fading into silence. Only Marco and a young woman named Lena survived, hiding in a small cave until dawn. When rescuers arrived, they found only scattered remains in the forest. Marco and Lena told their story, but no one believed them. People said they were delusional from trauma. But Marco knew the truth. In that cave, he'd seen something he'd never forget. An ancient carving on the wall, showing a massive boar with glowing red eyes, surrounded by kneeling figures. Beneath it, in Old Latin, were the words, Ira Naturi, the wrath of nature. The Tuscany attack shook the world. Scientists, journalists, and even paranormal investigators flocked to the area, searching for answers. Some said the boars were evolving, becoming a new, deadlier species. Others believed they were controlled by a supernatural force, a curse awakened by humanity's destruction of the natural world. Whatever the truth, one thing was clear: wild boars were no longer just animals. Today, as you hear this story, remember that the forests are still alive, still breathing. Out there, in the darkness, the boars are moving, their eyes glowing, their growls echoing. They're waiting, they're hunting, and maybe, just maybe, they're closer than you think. So the next time you step into the woods, listen closely. If you hear a metallic hiss, whispers in the shadows, or a low, rumbling growl, run. Run as fast as you can, because the Black Phantom, Die Schatten, or whatever you call them, they don't forgive. And if you think this is just a story, take a look out your window. What do you see in the dark? Maybe it's just the wind, or maybe it's them.